Order, please. We'll call the Standing Committee of Public Accounts to order. Just before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. Asking everybody if they have their cell phones to place them in silent or vibrate. And if you see the clock behind me, you'll notice the time is not the same as the one ahead of us, and we'll be following the ones ahead of me right now, okay, for the rest of the meeting. So we'll begin by asking for introductions of the committee members, and we'll start with Ms. Roberts.
Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Good morning, Lisa Roberts, MLA for Halifax Needham.
Good morning and welcome. Tim Hallman, MLA for Dartmouth East.
Good morning, Rafa Di Costanzo, MLA for Clayton Park West, and I'm here on behalf of Gordon Wilson. Thank you.
Welcome, Suzanne Lonis-Croft, MLA Lunenburg.
Benjamin Jessam Hammonds, Plains Lucasville.
Good morning, Brendan McGuire, Halifax Atlantic.
Hugh McKay, Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you. On today's agenda, we have officials from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal with us to discuss the use of P3 of twinning Highway 104 between Antigonish and Pictou County. So we'll go ahead and ask the witnesses to introduce themselves, and then they can begin with their opening remarks.
Me first. Peter Hackett, Chief Engineer with Transportation Infrastructure Renewal.
Paul LaFleche, Deputy Minister, Transportation Infrastructure Renewal.
Dianne Saurette, Executive Director of Finance for the Department.
Janice Harland, a Director of Capital Programs with Transportation Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you. Mr. LaFleche, I believe you're going to be making the opening remarks.
Yes, I do. So you've introduced the staff already. I will note that Peter Hackett is also the Chair of the Board of Highway 104 Corporation, which is not on the agenda today, but I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for the invitation to talk with you today about the use of a P3 for the Highway 104 Sutherlands River to Antigonish twinning project. This was a new project announced in 2017. We're very excited about it, and it will extend the twinning on the Trans-Canada, significantly improve safety, and be of great benefit to Nova Scotians. As committee members know, this twinning project was identified several years ago as one of the highest priorities in the public when we did heavily attended public consultations. We heard loud and clear that Nova Scotians want, in fact, a safer and better highway system, particularly the 100 series. We also heard very clearly that they want improvements without tolls. So this is a P3, but it's a P3 without tolls. In 2017, Minister McClellan was Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Minister at the time, and he committed to doing a series of improvements to highways, one of which was the 104 section we're here to talk about today. Each of our 100 series highways are crucial corridors for the movement of people, goods, and services throughout this province, or in fact, in this case, to other provinces and throughout Canada, because it's part of the national highway system. These are the backbone of our transportation system. This 104, which is part of the Trans-Canada, is particularly vital to our economy. It is our critical highway link to export goods, import goods, and in fact, to send them to Newfoundland and Labrador. Twinning Sutherlands River to Antigonish is a priority because of the improved efficiency it will bring to goods and services providers, and also because of the safety, improved safety will bring to Nova Scotians. Given the financial constraints of the province and the price tag of over $2 billion to complete all of the 100 series sections that were desired by the public, the government needed to look at ways to upgrade or twin about 300 kilometers of highways quickly and affordably without the use of highway tolls. And I do emphasize the word quickly because that was part of the initiative. The government considered various options and determined that a design, build, finance, operate, maintain, or a full P3 model for this project would deliver the best value for money for Nova Scotians, plus deliver it on time, and that is quickly. The P3 approach will mean that we have 38 kilometers twinned of highway, open earlier, than we would through a traditional approach. It also means we will have twinned 4-lane 104 from the New Brunswick border to just east of Antigonish by 2023. The work will include 2 new interchanges. We were fortunate that the federal government saw this as a critical national transportation corridor and decided to contribute $90 million of incremental new money to Nova Scotia over and above what we would normally get from the federal government through our allocation through the National Trades Corridors Fund to this project. Mr. Chair, the project is on schedule and we are currently in the RFP phase with 3 bidders preparing competitive proposals that are due this fall. Evaluation of these proposals, selection of the preferred proponent, and final negotiations will follow, with a contract finalized in April 2020, in time for the 2020 construction season. The successful proponent among the 3 will be required to operate and maintain this highway for 20 years following the substantial completion of the project and to standards that are set by the province. While the proponent is responsible for ensuring safe and efficient operation of the highway, ownership of the highway stays with the people of Nova Scotia. We are excited about this project, Mr. Chair. We have conducted a thorough value for money analysis, and we are confident that this model will deliver to Nova Scotians a safer and more efficient highway years earlier than we would have had with a traditional build. Before I conclude, I do want to be clear to committee members and to Nova Scotians that we're currently in the middle of the competitive bid process for this project. As a result, we are limited in what we can share with the committee at this time. We are obligated under our procurement rules not to share financial details or other internal confidential information that could compromise or be seen to compromise the fairness and integrity of the competitive tendering process. Openness and transparency are important to us, but we must not harm the competitive process or detract from government's negotiating position during this critical phase. We look forward to being invited back to this committee at a later date when we can share more fully the success of this project once the contract is signed, and that'll be, as I said, approximately April 2020. And we look forward to sharing the full value for money analysis that will be updated at that time, and it will be finalized during the construction period. In closing, let me say that we have done our homework, and I believe at the end of the day, the P3 model for this project is in the best interest of the taxpayer. It delivers good value for money, and it is an appropriate fit for this project based on the business case. It is not always an appropriate fit. The last time I was here to talk about the health sector, I indicated that sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't, and we do careful analysis about when that works and doesn't work. We also draw upon the experiences that have been gained in other provinces and jurisdictions across North America. In this case, we feel that this is a good fit. I want to make a few comments. I'm sorry I'm slightly underdressed, not as underdressed as I was last time when I rolled in here with a prop. I will have to get up about halfway through and do something. I'll go outside, do some stretching and exercises. And I don't have my shoes on because they still won't fit. So I'm in Skechers today. I apologize for that. I do have my new tie on, though. I know that the chair would be worried about that. So we are here to answer questions. We will actually carefully avoid questions, and Janice Harland will keep us on track that might compromise the process. But we will reveal full information on all of that when we come back once the contract has been awarded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaFleche. And before we begin the questioning, I also want to acknowledge we do have a representative of the Auditor General's office in attendance, as well as representatives of Flesche Council. So we'll begin the first round of questions. 20 minutes each caucus, and we'll begin with the PC caucus. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Minister, it's good to see that you're on the mend. With respect to the with the bidders, who are the 3 bidders that are putting forward the competitive proposals?
Sorry. Ms. Harland.
It's Dexter Nova Alliance, Osprey Transportation Solutions, and Atlantic SafeLink Partners are the 3 consortia.
Mr. Hammond.
All right, thank you. Could you outline for Nova Scotians what makes a good P3 project? What are the measures that we use to determine that this is adequate, this is good, this is sufficient for Nova Scotians? Could you outline what makes a good P3 project?
Ms. Harland.
The P3 project suits in this instance because, as Deputy LaFleche said, the goal is to get a quality highway built as quickly as possible and get the safety benefits in place as soon as possible at best cost to Nova Scotians. And so so we looked at the P3 options available to us to see how we would go about achieving that. The basic model is design build, and that certainly helps with the schedule. When you add in the finance part and a lender has money at risk, that really helps drive cost efficiencies and schedules and keeps the project on track. And then the last part that we looked at was the full P3, as was stated, when we add in the operations, maintenance, and rehabilitation. And so when you have a single entity responsible for all those aspects, that really drives an opportunity to make the best decisions and drives a quality build. So if you have to maintain that highway for 20 years, you're going to do what's necessary up front to make sure it's a quality project. So we looked at that from sort of a qualitative aspect in terms of the P3 model. We then went and did a market sounding with the industry to see if there would be a competitive procurement if we put a project such as this forward. And lastly, as was mentioned, we did a detailed value for money to ensure that the cost of doing it this way, a full P3, would be advantageous versus the traditional build. And all those indicators were positive. And so that's what we did to make sure that this was an appropriate approach for this particular project.
Okay, thank you. Before we proceed, I'm going to ask everybody if they can speak closely into the mic because we have the fans going here too. So for everybody's benefit, Mr. Hammond.
Thank you.
Mr. Hammond.
Mr. Chair, can you contrast the fundamental differences between the P3 and the traditional build, just so that Nova Scotians have clarity? What are the fundamental differences?
Mr. Hackett.
Sorry. So the difference between a P3 and a conventional build, and normally in a conventional build, the department would take several years before the project to do basically the design, pick up all the pre-engineering work, and they get the project prepared, and then we would send those designs and the contract, the tender out to tender, and then from there, the contractor would be awarded the job, build the job, and complete the job, and the department would basically take the job back over and look after the maintenance and operations of it. In a P3 project, all of that upfront work is given to the consortium, and they would do the design, all the pre-engineering. They would do the build, and then they would look after all the maintenance and operations after. As Ms. Harland said earlier, the benefit to this P3 is just that we had to get this one done very quickly, or get it done quickly within a certain period of time. And this particular project wasn't really ready on the shelf to go to tender to do it conventionally if they wanted to get it done, quicker and more efficiently. Other projects like the 101, the 103 had been ready for some time, and we were able to get those out under a conventional build.
Mr. Hallman.
And Ms. Harland, will you be tasked and with others to oversee the execution of the P3? How many other civil servants in the department will oversee the P3 execution?
Ms. Harland?
I think that's...
Mr. Hackett?
So on the execution right now, we probably have about 4 or 5 people working on the project directly. As it, internal staff, we have a number of consultants, and we have Department of Justice and legal and that sort of thing. So I couldn't. There's more people than just the department. Those 4 or 5, and internally in the department will execute the project or start the project. But as the project sort of unfolds, there'll be more people we require to oversee the job, and then also into the long term to basically look after the agreements under the maintenance and operations for the 20 years. So there'll be other people hired to look after that as well internally. The numbers I couldn't say, but I would say roughly between 5 and 10 people would have to look after the job from start to finish. But the start to finish, the start of the project is potentially for next year for construction, but the finish isn't for 20 years after the job is completed. So there's a whole life of the project.
Mr. Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for those tasked with oversight, with monitoring, what rubric do they use to measure the success of a P3 project?
Ms. Harland?
I think that's standard, but to get into any detail, we're getting into the details of the current tender process, and that information is best left until that's completed, so that we maintain the integrity of the process and get a solid procurement process completed, so that the project can proceed. But at the time that's completed, then we can get into the details of how that is managed. But right now, that information is confidential.
Mr. Hammond?
So excluding the specifics of this project, generally speaking, what rubric does the Department of TIR use to measure the success of P3, generally speaking?
Ms. Harland?
Well, when the tender process is completed, we'll refresh the value for money analysis. So that will give us an indication and confirmation of the cost aspect. And when it's completed, we'll refresh that. So from a cost perspective, that's the measure.
Mr. Hammond. Oh, Mr. LaFleche. Sorry. Oh, Mr. Hackett.
So away from this P3, but the department does oversee the Cobequid Pass, the Western Alignment Corporation, and that's a P3 project as well. So to measure this, that's a fairly successful project, and it's done very well in its existence in the last 23 years, I think it's been running. And so the way that's set up is the contracts under that, there's a process of dispute resolution. So the consortium under that program has to maintain the highway to certain standards. They have to maintain it with both operational maintenance, like pothole patching and that sort of thing, as well as capital. So they have to come back and repave after so many years, and so on and so forth. So if they don't do that, there are dispute resolution processes in place that would require that they would basically make them do the work they're supposed to do under our levels of service. So that's the way the contracts are written. In that particular project, though, on the Cobequid Pass, like I say, it's been very successful. We haven't really had any problems with dispute resolution. The consortium has ensured that the project is basically kept up to standard for the last 23 years. But there are caveats in place to ensure that they do the work well. And like I said, that's probably one of our best maintained highways in the province.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will there be a guaranteed profit clause to this project?
Ms. Harland.
That's getting into the details of the procurement that we can't get into it at present.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will there be any bonds that will be issued with respect to this project?
Ms. Harland.
Again, these are questions that are going to be better able to be answered at the end of the procurement process.
Mr. Hum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How is it planned for private investors to make profit off this investment? For example, will there be tolls on this highway?
Ms. Harland.
I think it's been clearly stated that there won't be tolls. This is a competitive procurement. We have 3 qualified bidders bidding, and maintaining a fair and appropriate tender process, maintaining the competitive environment of the tender process, which is one of the constraints of being able to share today, is that we want that tender process to remain competitive so that we get the best price out of the bids.
Mr. Hum.
In terms of the procurement process, I'm curious, when it comes to the eventual winner of the bid, generally speaking, does the department, what criteria do you look at? Does it seek out the lowest bidder? What's the criteria you look at when it comes to that process? Can you outline that for Nova Scotians? What criteria goes into that?
Ms. Hellman?
Again, I can't
Harland.
share the details of the tender itself, but the principles that are underlying the whole project are to get a quality highway in place so that the safety benefits are in place sooner at the best cost for Nova Scotians. So those are the principles that underlie the project. But I can't give you, again, at this point, the details of the tender.
Mr. Hum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the twinning of the highway from exit 26, Thorburn to Sutherlands River, it is completed. However, I've heard that this section is included in the tender process from Sutherlands River to Antigonish, and it has been completed. And so maybe the reason is to give the private company that complete stretch of highway to maintain. I'm curious, though, will the successful tender bid include the cost of the road that is complete? Will that be factored in that tendering process?
Ms. Harland?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That stretch is already completed. Is that going to be factored in the tendering process? Is that being included in that process?
Ms. Harland.
There's a stretch of road that's included in the process in terms of the bidders being required to provide a price to maintain and rehabilitate that road.
Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what guidelines or commitments can the department guarantee that the highway will be completed by 2024? I mean, this is obviously a clear priority for the residents of that area of Nova Scotia. You can guarantee that this will be completed by 2024, correct?
Ms. Harland.
It's a requirement. I can share that it's a requirement of the tender that it be completed to meet government's stated deadline of being in use by the end of 2023, I thought was, yeah.
Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what will the percentage of Pictou and Antigonish County truckers hired to work on this project be? Is there a commitment to try to hire locally when it comes to the construction of this twinning of the highway?
Mr. Hackett.
Yeah, so there's no, right now there's no guarantee in the contract or in P3s in general that we've had to hire local truckers. We expect the consortiums to hire from that area, but that would basically be up to the contractors themselves. On our conventional projects, we do have a statement in there about local trucking, but on P3 contracts, we've never had that statement in there because it sort of takes in the factor of the entire project, and it limits, when you put that into the program, you limit the actual bidding and the bidding process. So there's no guarantee, but we'd expect that the contractors in this case would hire locally.
Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious if a private company was to provide either poor service or ended up going over budget by a considerable degree in, say, a past project for the government, within the rubric the standards that you have, would that be considered in the bidding process, or would they be given a clean slate when it comes to a project like this? Basically, the past history, is that factored in if a company's putting another bid in? I mean, do you look at that when looking at a new tender?
Mr. Hackett.
So under this particular project, I couldn't comment with regard to that because it would be it's under whatever that agreement is, and like we said, that's out to tender right now. On typical projects, that doesn't happen too often under procurement. So if you have a poor performer, so to speak, we do go down the road of advising that poor performer or that contractor, and if they can or can't bid on other projects, or trying to get them up to a better standard to bid on future projects. But that's kind of through the Department of ISD with procurement. So it's not just with highway tenders, it's with all sorts of procurements. It's basically letting them know that you've been a poor performer, and you have to go down a fairly long road to get to the point that you're not going to rebid, but you would have to go through a program to make sure that you can qualify to be a good participant, so to speak. But I couldn't refer to this particular project, but in general, that's the way our department works. Yeah.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So after an infrastructure project such as this is completed, I'm curious, how long are the construction companies liable for repairs and maintenance that may arise if the quality of their work was not adequate? I suppose this comes back to a conversation we've had at previous meetings with respect to the warranties. Could you outline that for us, what the scope of responsibilities are after a project like this is completed with repairs and maintenance?
Ms. Searle?
It's, I guess that's one of the advantages that of a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. If you're building it, you also have to operate and maintain it. So you're held to your own. You're at risk of your own quality of workmanship. So it's, again, this is a competitive procurement. And so companies are going to want to figure out the best way, the most cost-effective way to do this, but they also have to meet the requirements of the contract. So they're I guess masters of their own. They have to do it. It drives a quality job. I guess the DBFOM model drives a quality construction right up front because they're required to maintain it.
Mr. Hammond?
How much time left do I have, Mr. Chair?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, with respect to the total amount of wetlands, I'm curious how many wetlands will be impacted by this project. Could you tell us about that?
Ms. Harland?
There's wetlands identified in the project corridor. Those have been, through the environmental assessment process, have been identified. But until the design is completed, we won't have an exact area of impact. But there's certainly a process and a requirement to appropriately deal with that.
Mr. Hammond with 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And well, with respect to that, could you outline what what policies the department has with respect to perhaps compensating those who will lose wetlands? How does the department or government plan on compensating or making for this loss of wetlands in our province? Is there a policy and procedure in place now that deals with that?
Ms. Harland? Oh, Mr. Hackett.
I can talk briefly about it, or generally about it, but for most of our major projects, we're under what they call the HAD program, and so that's a trade-off of if you have to take away wetland on one side and you've created wetland somewhere else, you actually get points for creating the wetland, so you can use those points for creating wetland towards the reduction of wetland. So, for instance, I would say the 104, as Janice said, right now we're not sure exactly what the design looks like, but let's just use the 10, we'll use the 103. There was wetlands on the 103. We had points in our HAD bank, so we could fill in some of those wetlands using those HAD points. And if we wanted to create more HAD points for the bank, we would have to go, maybe we change a culvert somewhere or put a better bridge in or create some sort of a salt marsh, and then we would get points towards our bank. And I could tell you, I got to figure out what the HAD acronym actually means. It's habitat, and anyway, it's creating wetlands anyway, and that's the way we basically do it within the department. It's based on a point system.
Okay, thank you. The time for the PC caucus has expired for the first round, so we'll turn now to the NDP caucus. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2016, the department commissioned a highway twinning feasibility study from CBCL, which is a consulting firm in Halifax. The preliminary report from the study calculated a proposed total cost, which included construction and purchase of land and water rights, of $232.4 million for this 37.75 kilometer section of the highway. The figure was then revised, excuse me, up to $285 million in the final report for the construction alone. So that's a $52.6 million more than highway construction currently costs the government for identical lengths of twinned highway through normal procurement processes. So I'm wondering if the Deputy Minister can explain why the department has elected to go with a public-private partnership for this project when costs through a traditional build would be much lower.
Mr. LaFleche.
Allow Peter Hackett to explain that.
Mr. Hackett.
I can talk a little bit about it. So that figure of 235 to 285, I'm not really sure the difference of why that is different. So I'd have to have a look at that report to where it went from one to the other. But in normal conventional builds, we're running between $5 and $10 million a kilometer per two-lane highway, and that's not going down any. That's continuously going up. I've been here for 21 years, and the first year I came here, it was $1 million a kilometer. So we're at 5 to 10 million. And so when you get into the construction on a conventional build, that's it wouldn't be a whole lot different. We don't expect it to be a whole lot different between that and a P3. This is 38 kilometers long. 285 is less than 10 million. So I would think that's probably in the ballpark. Where you'll probably see a difference in prices on some of the P3s, there's other things involved with P3s. I can't say specifically to this one, but you put other risks into that contract on a P3, like we did on the Cobequid Pass. So you might see the value, you might see some of the pricing go up, but it also takes some of the risk off the department as well. So there's some costs in there that you may see, but not really have to you can only understand by going through the actual process. But the 285 in that number doesn't seem a whole lot different than our normal costs of conventional, but I don't know the 235. It could be correct, yeah. And as Deputy Minister LaFleche says, we may not have had all the right-of-way numbers at that time for the 235, but I have to check what the number actually was. The other part of that, just as an example, when we've raised it here before in the House, that when we did the Antigonish bypass, or the Antigonish 4 lanes past Antigonish, that was a 10-kilometer section of road that cost $160 million, so roughly $10 million a kilometer. Now there's interchanges and things in there that would drive your cost up, but that's the high end, but that's pretty standard of where we're at.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you. So yeah, my sort of follow-up question was going to be, can you tell us why that $52 million increase happened? It's a 23% increase in the cost. So if you can find that information and forward it on to the committee, that would be great. But just talking about construction costs alone, it might be ballpark that, P3s are in the same ballpark as traditional builds, but then we have to add on other costs, as you mentioned. So the decision, I think, and I've said this before, the decision to turn the financing of this project to a P3 is, frankly, baffling. The government and Minister Hines often refers to the Cobequid Pass as a success story, and yet the decision to finance the Cobequid Pass through P3 contract cost the province upwards of $100 million more than it would have had to finance it through government bond issue. For $66 million in financing, we paid over $140 million in interest, and that's an 81% premium for the privilege of having a P3 project. And that's to say nothing of the $350 million that Nova Scotians have paid in tolls on that highway. So can the Deputy Minister please tell the committee what premium Nova Scotians can expect to pay on the private financing of this stretch of highway cumulatively over the 20-year lifespan?
Mr. LaFleche?
Yeah, I thought that Dianne and I would be able to go over to Pavy and get a coffee for a while, but Dianne is now needed, so she will talk to that.
Ms. Saurette?
Thank you. So I can, so the question directed to the deputy, I'll let him answer that question, but I can speak to the past. So you've made some reference to over 300 million, and when you talk about Cobequid, you have to, I think the first thing I think we need to clarify is that in 96, when you looked at financing rates, it has to be relative. You have to think about where we are with our provincial cost of borrowing. Now I wasn't around in 96, but our provincial cost of borrowing was somewhere around 9%. The interest rate for the pass is 10.25, so it's pretty close. When we look at over $300 million in tolls, that's just not for bond financing. That has covered, like the obligation that the tolls cover is definitely the bond financing, but it also covers the maintenance, the rehabilitation, the operations of the pass, our snow removal, like all of those things. The tolls has covered over the last 23 years. And when we say that it's been successful, is that one, we have a very well maintained highway system, but when you look at, we built 45 kilometers of highway in 20 months. And as the chief engineer had mentioned earlier about the 10 kilometers that we did in Antigonish that cost $160 or $165 million, that took us probably about 10 years. So the thing with being able to, when you look at, does it make sense and what can it cover, and being able to build, in the case of the pass, a very, from a safety perspective, like one of the worst highways that we had in Nova Scotia at the time, we were able to build a highway very quickly, 45 kilometers. It cost about $120 million at that time. We were able to get about $27 million of federal money to go towards that. So there's a lot of definitely the benefits. I think the biggest one is, of course, that, we were able to do it quickly. And I think if we compare to doing it traditionally, it is less cost effective. And we also reduce fatalities. So,
Thank you. Ms. LeBeau?
Thank you. Absolutely no qualms with the fact that twinned highways are safer. And of course, we want safer highways for everyone, but we also want highways that are actually cost effective. So several times already today, the witnesses have referred to better, basically better bang for your buck. And so I just take issue with that assertion. The CBCL report that estimates the cost of the building of this project at $285 million now also includes a figure of $300 million in debt repayment. The report estimates long-term debt financing rates at 5.25%, which is lower than back in the 90s. I think that's when it was. And the construction debt, the short-term debt, is 3.25%. But we know that we can get better rates. The Parliamentary Budget Officer just released a pre-election proposal costing baseline that has the 3-month Treasury rate at 1.7% and the 10-year government bond rate at just 2%. And I know, excuse me, if we look at the difference between 2.2% and 5%, it doesn't seem like that much. But when you're considering the amount of money that we're talking about, and the amortization period, then it's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're costed, that Nova Scotians are on the hook for, that we don't have to be. And anyone who owns a home or has a mortgage or even a long-term loan knows that the difference between 2 and 5% interest is huge. So will the Deputy Minister please tell the committee the interest rate that the private bidders have access to and how it compares to the interest rate that the government currently has access to?
Mr. LaFleche.
Yeah, you should.
Ms. Saurette.
Yes, thanks. I can't speak to what interest rate the private bidders are going to have access to. We're just not at that stage. In terms of what is our provincial cost of borrowing, I'll have to confirm that, but we're probably around 4%. So when I know that for the convention center, and I'm going to raise this one because it's a recent one, the interest rate was very close to the provincial cost of borrowing. You can't not consider that if we did it traditionally, we would still have to pay financing. So traditionally, yes, it would be lower, but as Peter had mentioned earlier, we are just not in a place that we can do this traditionally. We will be 10 years out. And then you'd have to look at escalation and where we are now, like in 10 years' time, in terms of where we are with our provincial cost of borrowing, where we are with, costs to build a highway. Are we past that, 5 million a kilometre, 10 million a kilometre? Are we now up to 13 million a kilometre? So we have to consider it relatively, like where are we at? And to do it traditionally, we could not start the project next year. It would be years ahead of time, and we would be looking at different costs at that time.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Thanks. I mean, that is, I'm going to move on from this, but I actually don't understand that because I've heard this argument before. The federal government came to the table in 2018. Our provincial government knew that we had money set aside, or campaigned on the fact that there was money set aside in the last election. So had we just gone with the federal money and started the process, we would be well into the process right now. As it is, we may start construction in 2020, may finish 2023. I'm going to leave that. I don't want to dwell on that. But public-private partnerships have been abandoned in the United Kingdom because of issues with contract holders flipping the contracts to make enormous profits, problem with service levels, problems with bankruptcy of corporations such as Carillion. A financial issue has developed in regard to local and state governments taking on multiple P3 contracts and not being able to pay the higher yearly costs. Why is Nova Scotia going forward with P3 projects when other jurisdictions are justifiably abandoning this failed model, and Nova Scotia's own record with P3 schools and the $232 million overspent on the Cobequid Pass? Isn't it risky and irresponsible decision to go ahead with new P3 builds without revealing the full details and when the government cannot point to a single P3 success story? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Mr. LaFleche.
Where those facts are from, but we feel we have many P3 success stories. I'd also like to point out that we went out and got $90 million for this project from the federal government, and we really want to thank the federal government for that. That's incremental money. We're paying zero interest on that, and guess what? We're not repaying the principal. So that comes right off the top of the project. That's essentially found money. It's money the federal government didn't allocate per capita to Nova Scotia. We had to compete nationally with other projects across Canada. And so that, to me, was a major benefit of this project. And I think we sometimes forget that. In fact, I don't know what the exact figure is, but if we add in the interchange that was announced last week in Bridgewater, a brand new interchange to expand both the municipal and the town industrial parks. If we add in the Windsor Junction project here in Halifax and the port component of that project, which will be of significant benefit for moving goods and services out of Nova Scotia, and also for commuters who go through the Windsor Junction. Yeah, but I'll get there in a minute. But if we add all that up, we'll find we're somewhere around 170 million in incremental money for these projects, which take off the top an obligation of Nova Scotia taxpayers.
Okay,
So on the question, and maybe I've given a speech too long that I don't remember the question, but I'm not sure we agree with some of those assertions.
Okay, Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move on and change tack a little bit. In April, a staff person with the Canadian Union of Public Employees filed a FOI request for the RFP for this contract. The request was processed by a FOIPOP officer who issued a fee estimate of $1,100 for retrieval of the documents. QP paid the fee and the retrieval process began, but then in July, a FOIPOP officer informed the QP staff member that the request had been canceled. The RFP was released in January. Is it still the same document today as it was then? Has the government been revising it in discussions with the bidders?
Ms. Harland?
The RFP process is confidential. It's an established process by which we're going to get competitive bids from each of the 3 bidders. And to get into the details of that subverts the process and really risks the timeline of the project and the integrity of the process.
Okay, Ms. LeBlanc. Ms. Harland, I'm going to ask if you could just speak in a little closer.
Thanks.
Ms. LeBlanc.
To be clear, I'm not asking for the details of the RFP, although I think that would be great to know, but I'm asking if the RFP was changed from the beginning of the process to where we are now. I'm wondering if the Deputy Minister could tell the committee if he believes that it would be ethical for the department to involve bidders on a $250 million contract in the drafting of the RFP.
Ms. Harland?
The RFP process is established. I'm not sure that the process is different from the questions about the RFP itself. This is a well-established way of tendering P3 projects that we are following. We're not deviating from that process. But unfortunately at this point, to get a very competitive, to maintain the competitive tension that we have among the 3 bidders, it's just not appropriate. And in fact, it could really derail the process if we start going outside the confidentiality aspects of the process that we're bound by.
Ms. LeBlanc?
So to be clear, the department is not going to answer the question whether or not the RFP changed from when it was first released, when the RFP was first sent out, to where it is now. I don't want to know the details. I just want to know if it was changed. I'm wondering if the Deputy Minister could confirm that the fact that the RFP is still a work in progress has nothing to do with the fact that the document will be released to the Canadian Union of Public Employees.
Mr. LaFleche.
Peter, do you want to answer? I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's under FOIPOP, so it's whether they want to release it or not. We haven't released it.
Yeah, we're not sure we understand the question, so we can take some time to figure that out.
Ms. LeBlanc.
So the Canadian Union of Public Employees applied to see applied for the information through a FOIPOP request. It started to be filled, that request, and then was canceled. So the QP will not get to see excuse me, the information that they asked for. So I'm just wondering if you can confirm the reason why it was canceled. Was their request canceled because the RFP is still a work in progress?
Mr. LaFleche.
Get to cancel FOIPOP requests, so I'm confused at what do you mean by canceled?
Okay, so
Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you. As I said it earlier, the QP applied for through FOIPOP. They were charged $1,100, which they paid to get the information of the RFP, and then halfway through waiting for that information, they were told by a FOIPOP officer that they would not be getting the information. So they started that process of releasing the information and then stopped the process. And I'm wondering if you can confirm that the reason they stopped the process was because the RFP is still a work in progress.
Mr. LaFleche, with a minute and a half.
I can't confirm anything about the RFP at this point, and I can't confirm anything about the FOIPOP because that's done through a different department. So I'm not aware of this incident at all. We can look into it. Since the FOIPOP was filed by a private party, I'm not sure I can tell you anything about it, but it would be a question for Deputy Monroe.
Ms. Lamont, 1 minute.
Thank you. Can you tell us why the RFP being provided to private companies for free, why is it being provided to private companies for free when Nova Scotian residents are asked to pay $1,100 for a copy of it? Why won't the government release the RFP and all documents related to service levels so that Antigonish and Pictou County residents can be assured that they will get the same level of service as every other area in the province?
Mr. LaFleche, Mr. Hackett.
We're just discussing. So we're confused about this FOIPOP thing because that's not our game. But the RFP for free statement, the public, Janice will answer that.
Ms. Harland, you have 25 seconds.
Okay. The RFP, the body of the RFP, can be shared after the procurement is done. It's providing it for free. We're asking bidders to expend literally millions of dollars going through this process. The fact that we haven't charged them for the document that they'll need to do that.
But they haven't FOIPOP.
Order, please. The time for the NDP Caucus has expired. We'll go to the Liberal Caucus. Ms. Lonescroft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you have any other comments you wanted to add to your last question?
Ms. Harland?
Well, I just want to...
Mr. LaFleche.
I just want to reiterate, as I understand it, Janice can correct me, the document will be released to the public for free once the process is over. Is that correct?
Ms. Harland?
The main body of the RFP that seems to be of interest here.
But
Yeah.
Mr. LaFleche.
FOIPOP something, you know, they don't necessarily say, give me the document. They worded it in a very different way, and how that's charged and calculated by what is now the Service Nova Scotia Internal Services Department is not a question I can answer, but they may not have exactly FOIPOP'd what people think they FOIPOP'd. That's a privacy issue. I don't have any idea what was FOIPOP'd. So someone will, you know, you'd have to go back to CUPE and say, what exactly did you FOIPOP? Are you willing to release that to the public? You know, et cetera. And, you know, to me, it's not the same. We're apples and oranges here. We're going to give the document to the public when the process is over, the essentials of the document, just like the company got them, and that's where it's going to go. I don't know what the FOIPOP is about. A lot of people sent in FOIPOPs that said, give me everything about a P3 highway in Antigonish. Well, that's not the same as we requested the document. So it's kind of confusing for us what was asked. We don't know.
Ms. Lonescroft.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to before, if you don't mind. And I believe it was in 2016 that your department did a province-wide consultation regarding twinning highways and tolling. Was it 2016?
Mr. Hackett?
Yes, 2016 at the and then it ended at the beginning of 2017.
Ms. Lonescroft.
Okay, thank you. So I attended. There were 2 consultations in my area. I do recognize that some of these faces were there. We held one in Bridgewater, and there was also one at Oak Island. And I think at the consultations that I attended, there was an overwhelming number of people who rejected tolling. Is that what you perceived from that consultation?
Mr. Hackett?
Well, I think in general, at the end of the entire consultation process throughout the province, there was, you know, it was sort of, I think it was mixed depending on where you went per community, but I think overall it seemed like the general consensus was the public wanted twinned highways and safer highways to the communities, but they didn't want to pay a toll to get there. That was kind of and that was the consensus that came out of the study. And at the end of it, the government went with you know, some conventional methods, and then obviously the P3 and Sutherlands River.
Ms. Lonescroft.
Okay, so would you say that was generally the opinion throughout the province, not just in like Lunenburg County where I represent?
Mr. Hackett?
It was, so there were certain pockets of the province that were probably more leaning that they would take a toll, and there were some parts of the province that they wouldn't take a toll. But if you looked at I think there was 16 consultations done around the province, 16 or 13. I think if you looked at them on the overall from the public, you'd probably get a little bit below 50%. Were against, a little bit above 50% were against tolls. So that the province, the government decided the day that tolls wouldn't be the way to twin the highways.
Ms. Lonscraft?
Okay, thank you. So there were other suggestions, you know, in my area, there were Jersey barriers put up instead of twinning. More passing lanes on the 103. I mean, we had a death there just as recently as Friday. I travel it once a week. What other alternatives do we have to twinning? Like, are those the only ones?
Mr. Hackett?
So we'll just basically stick to 100 series highways, and you know, there are several sections. So just if I can go back a little bit to the consultation process back in 2016, there were 300 kilometers of road that were identified in that process. Some were twinning and some were not. I think there was about 80 kilometers that were, maybe 90 kilometers that were not twinning. That was across Cape Breton Island, which would be a brand new controlled access highway. So that was part of the process, but it wasn't going to be twinned. The other, we'll say 200 kilometers were basically twinned highways, and so the sections were obviously from Tantallon to Bridgewater, the 107 from Bedford to Porters Lake, the 101 that would complete the section through Windsor that we're working on right now, and then carry it on to the other side of Colebrook, and then finish off the 104 from Sutherlands River to the Canso Causeway. So those were the sections that were looked at as part of that consultation. So we chose the ones that we're picking based on the fact that that's where the most traffic is, and that's where we have a lot of the highest collision rates, or somewhere in around that. And so the remainder of it that we don't get twinned, we're looking at some other options. So for instance, if we use the 103, for example, there is opportunities on the 103 to do what they call 2+1s, which are basically what you'd see on the valley floor in Annapolis Valley between, I think they're between Berwick and Middleton, where we have an additional, it's like a climbing lane, but you're not actually on a hill, you're on a flat, and it provides you with a passing area. So those are used down the valley. We're looking at those for the 103 and some of the other areas that we won't get to twinning for some time. So that's another option that we could get into, and our department is looking at those, which I think the 103 is one of the candidates between Hubbards and Bridgewater. And then if we come in and twin in those sections, we would take those out and create twinning.
Ms. Lonscraft.
Even as my time in 2013 becoming an MLA and traveling the 103 every week, in the last 2 years, I've noticed an incredible increase in traffic. Can you confirm that? You must do traffic counts on the highways and comparisons?
Mr. Hackett?
Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to say it's probably
Mr.
my car
LaFleche.
since I bought a property down there. But Peter probably can confirm the traffic counts better than I can.
Mr. Hackett?
I don't have the exact numbers in comparison from, say, 2013 to 2019. I mean, I can get that information for you. We do traffic counts on the 100 series every year. We have a traffic book for those that I can certainly get to you. But we do know that the section that we're twinning right now between Tantallon and Hubbards is probably the busiest section with the most traffic. The traffic does die off a little bit between the next interchange, and then it goes down quite a bit between the next two interchanges, I think, and then it ramps back up in around, I think it's exit 11 to exit 13 around Bridgewater. So, but I couldn't tell you what the incremental percentage changes are. But we do know where the actual highest vehicle counts come, and we're twinning the first part. Then we can see if we can get beyond that.
Thank you. I just want everyone to keep in mind, please, that today's topic is about P3 between Antigonish and Pictou County, and we seem to be, as long as it comes to a point. Ms. Lonscraft.
So, a small province like Nova Scotia, and we've heard the Deputy Minister speak to the cost of that we do invest in our highways and in construction. What are the alternatives for a small province like us to build highways? I understand from the consultation in 2016, it would take 20 years for us to do the twinning that was proposed at the consultation if we did not toll. So what alternatives do we have to finance twinned highways in the locations that you deemed really for safety reasons important for our province? What alternatives do we have for Nova Scotia to pay for such construction?
Mr. LaFleche.
I guess one alternative, which was an option and which was ruled out by the people of Nova Scotia, were tolls. And that is an alternative that is taken all over North America and Europe. And we decided as a province, the public, decided they would not like tolls. So that we moved on from that to other options to do the financing and the construction. So we can't lose sight of the fact that there are other benefits than just the financing to this. And the financing is not off book. Mr. Spicer is over there and he can tell you that that changed years ago. So people who think that this is about off-book financing or some other thing, that's not what this is about. A lot of this is about building it quicker, doing it more efficiently, getting the safety improvements earlier for Nova Scotians, and getting a guaranteed price with on-time delivery. That's what a lot of it is about. It doesn't apply to all sections of highway. You see, we had 4 sections that Peter described, and we're doing a P3, a full P3. We always do some element of P3 everywhere in everything we do. But this is a full P3 with the maintenance included. We're only doing it on that one section of the 104 because we deemed through the value for money assessment that that would be the best way to do that section. We would have applied similar thinking to other sections, and we deemed that the other sections would not have a significant enough benefit through doing a P3, through doing it one or two of another type of approach.
Ms. Lonscroft.
Thank you. So in the twinning of the Highway 104 between Antigonish and Pictou, how much are we contributing as a province? Do we know that, to that project?
Ms. Harland? Oh.
We've received the 90 million through the National Trade Corridors Fund that was already mentioned. Going back to the fact that we're in a competitive procurement and we really want to maintain government's position, a negotiation position. We don't want to give that away at this point. So the actual expected costs are something that we're maintaining confidentiality around and not sharing, because we do not want, we want to maintain the competitive advantage that we have.
Ms. Lonscroft.
Thank you. I'll let my colleague from next to me, Mr. Jessam, question now.
Mr. Jessam.
I'll just quickly, and I guess in the context of we're trying to identify the expectations of Nova Scotians with respect to all projects in the past and future several years. With respect to the consultations that took place that my colleague, Ms. Lonscroft, referred to, what was the consensus, what was the conclusion with respect to timeliness that came forward through those consultations, the expectations of Nova Scotians?
Mr. Hackett?
So I think back to what I mentioned before is that I think that Nova Scotians wanted their highways twinned. They didn't want to pay for the toll to do it. So we ended up basically looking at what we could do with the financing that we had. And from that, we chose the projects that we deemed to be the most, I guess, the highest traffic volumes, around the highest traffic volumes that would have some of the highest collision rates. So Nova Scotians want their highways twinned, but didn't want to pay that toll for it, I guess, in general. I'm not saying that it was everywhere, every pocket, but I guess, going back to the twinned highway situation and going back to Ms. Lonscroft's original point she made about highways and roads. I mean, 100 series highways are getting busier in the province. We see that each year. We see more trucks on the highways. We see more cars on the highways. We see more travelers and visitors. And so it is imperative to make sure that your highways are as safe as possible. And that is the whole premise behind the twinning program. It's to make your highways safer. It's to move goods and services in the province a lot quicker and make sure they get to market and make sure people get to where they have to go. And so that was, I just want to go back to the P3 issue with the 104, is we don't think we would have got there without doing a P3 on Highway 104 or doing it in this direction. Otherwise, it would take us many, many years to get there. And if that's what people want us to do and not do like we did on the Cobequid Pass and come in and do it 20 months. And when we did the Cobequid Pass, we had, through the Folly Mountain, we had 3 fatalities a year, and now we're less than, 0.8 or something. So that's sort of the premise of the department. That's what we're trying to do here, is to make the roads safer and make them better for the traveling public. We're trying to balance that, obviously, with the financing behind it, too. And we know that, as you mentioned, we are a province that has limited resources, and we're trying to stretch those resources as best we can to get the basically product that we're looking for the safety and the moving, the safety of the public and the moving of goods.
Mr. Jessup?
Thank you, and I think it's important that we respect that wish and certainly maintain the department's position to consider both expediting the process with cost effectiveness. In saying that, Ms. LeBlanc's line of questioning touched on the discrepancy between historic methods of completing these projects and what we've chosen to do here today. Excuse me. I'm wondering. It was referred to, I believe, by Mr. Hackett, that said that there were types of responsibilities that the province was, willing to divest to the contractor and potentially assume less risk ongoing. Mr. Hackett, would you mind, through the chair, would you mind talking a little bit about what types of activities the province would have traditionally taken on in a traditional model versus what might be assumed by a private contractor?
Mr. Hackett.
So I'm not going to specifically talk about the Sutherlands River to Antigonish project, but I'll talk a little bit about the Cobequid Pass, because that is a P3 that we currently do have, they're general comparisons here. They're not exact by any means. But on the Cobequid Pass, the consortium and the agency, they look after the maintenance and operations of the pass. So they obviously look after. So in the province, all of our highway systems have a level of service. So our department's supposed to fill potholes and fix guardrails and maintain bridges at a certain time and date and have it done within there's a requirement timeline on our level of service. And that's on the same as our winter operations. So when we plow highways, 100 series are supposed to be plowed within 4 hours after a storm, and trunks and routes are another level of service, and local roads are another level of service. So those same levels of service are applied to the 104 corporation and the P3, but the department doesn't look after maintaining that level of service. It's given to the consortium, and they're supposed to meet all those requirements the same as the department would, but they look after them, and they're paid for, in that case, under the toll system. But that's the type of risk that we would transfer over to the consortium, as the operations and maintenance of the highway itself, as well as anything else that happens up there. Things like if there's an accident on the highway, or if there's debris on the highway, or if the highway has to be closed, that's all done. It's our highway, but it's done through the consortium. They look after the whole operations and maintenance of the road. So that's the type of risks you hand over to them, as well as, like I say, accidents, cleanups, that sort of thing as well. I think that's pretty much on the operations side of it. There's other things that go along with highway risk as well, like anything that happens is if the road, let's say for instance, a culvert failed, or if the asphalt became so bad that they had to repave it, that is all the risk that we transfer towards the P3 consortium at the Cobequid Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Jessup, with 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. So, dare I ask, but how do we look to maintain these roads without tolls? I think that's an important question to ask.
Where are we going? Ms. Saurette?
Well, if we had an unlimited budget and we can maintain them, but it's all about balance. And, you know, our department is only one of many departments. And, you know, government, we have a budget and we get so much revenue to, you know, to help offset our budget. And we, you know, it's a balance. It comes down to priority and where are the needs, and doing things traditionally. We have a 5-year capital plan, so we long-term plan. We have a plan after the 5-year capital plan as well, but it really comes down to budget and what we have available in terms of to be able to spend. So it would be difficult for us to say that, you know, we can meet all those standards doing things status quo more traditionally than what we do. It really comes down to we know what our highway system is like in our province, and so we do the best that we can with the budget, but we also look at what are some other options, what are some other funding pots that we can access. You know, we have very close relationships with our federal partners.
Please. Sorry, the time for the Liberal caucus has expired, which allows for 12 minutes for the second round for each of the caucuses, and we'll go right to Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Minister, you indicated that there are many P3 success stories in Nova Scotia's history. Can you provide examples of highway-based P3s that ended up costing Nova Scotians less than if it was simply done through the traditional procurement system? Could you provide some specifics of success stories, please?
Ms. Saurette?
So I'll try to answer that one. The only one that we have is the Cobequid Pass. And so that's under a 30-year bond financing. We're going into year 23. The expectation is that we're going to be in a place to pay off the bonds in early 2020. You know, when we look at the highway itself, it was built, given the amount of kilometers, over 45 kilometers, it was built very, you know, quicker than what we would have done traditionally. It's, you know, we look at the condition and the quality of the highway. We don't just look at the cost, we look at the whole project. But if we were to build that highway traditionally, we probably would have just been in the last 5 years opening it. So that's really the only one that we can speak to, because it's the only one that we have, and we're going to be in a place soon to be able to pay the debt on it. So,
Mr. Hammond?
Are there any other examples that you can cite, or is that the sole example?
Mr. LaFleche?
Well, we're just discussing here how many P3 highways we have, and I think the only things we can think of in terms of highways would be the 104 Cobequid that we've built. So 1 for 1 is better than most J's are hitting these days. The other examples we would have would be the 2 harbor bridges, which is a separate agency set up. It does have its own status. It's got a board, and it does borrow money, and it does collect tolls. And we are very satisfied. We feel the big lift, which was only the second time that's been done in North America, was an incredible example of a corporation innovating, taking risks, and coming up with a big success. So we're quite happy with these examples, the 104, and the harbor bridges would be the other one.
Ms. Saurette?
I think the other thing I just want to clarify is that unlike, is it the 407 in Toronto? Yeah. The Cobequid is the provincial crown corporation. So the revenue goes to the province. That's why we're in a place that we can pay the debt soon. So the revenue risk, one of the risks that were transferred or didn't get transferred, is it stayed with the province. So it's our provincial crown. It's one of our GBEs. It's a separate Crown corporation because of the toll, because the toll is it's very specific in the legislation as to what the toll can be used for. Can't build a school or a hospital. It stays with the Crown. But we are in a place because we own it and the revenue is ours, the excess revenue. So, you know, we're in a place soon to be able to pay that debt down.
Mr. Hum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This summer, I took my kids to New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario, and they had a chance to see the different infrastructure that exists in our different provinces. And certainly, I had my kids on Highway 407, and they certainly appreciated avoiding Highway 401. The reason I say this is often here in Nova Scotia, we do a jurisdictional scan, best practices throughout Canada. When it comes to these types of highway constructions, do we do a jurisdictional scan with other provinces to see what best practices are? Is there any information you can provide us with that?
Mr. LaFleche.
Yes, we've looked at, the answer is yes. We did that, and also as part of the feasibility study we did for this, we looked at that. But some of the examples, heavily promoted recently, in fact, all of the deputies have had multiple presentations on this, is the Regina bypass in Saskatchewan, the extension of the 407, as well as the original 407 in Ontario, the construction that's going on now for the 427 in Ontario, and the next phase of the Regina bypass are just some examples. But we scanned across North America basically to look at what's been done elsewhere. One of the things we like to do is see where there's been other successes and failures and lessons learned. So when we started down the P3 road back in the mid-90s with Bob Moody at Education, and we did some schools, we were basically the first in the game in Canada. We were really at the front end of the innovation. Things have gone a long way since then. A lot of lessons learned everywhere where people have done P3s. We incorporate those lessons into the model we're looking at today. So other P3s that we've done recently or plan to do, we had a P3 which unfortunately New Brunswick pulled out of on mobile radio, trunk radio. It was before your time, Member Hallman, but your predecessor would remember that well. We ended up doing it ourselves in a non-P3 because it became much smaller. But we have a P3 without the maintenance up at the new convention center, the Nova Center. So far going very well, delivered within the long stop date and on budget. So we're very satisfied with that P3 so far. As I mentioned earlier, we have a number of P3 schools, which I won't speak to because I have no real knowledge of them. They were done in the 90s. So and I think the Burnside, what do you call it?
The jail.
No, it's not the jail. The morgue. I got the wrong name for it. It's called the morgue somewhere else, but it's called something else here. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It's where there are people go and inspect how people died. I'm sure the media know what that is. Do you know what it is, Peter?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's called the morgue in a lot of places.
Go back to,
Okay, so that was done as a P3.
Mr. Hallman.
All right, so it's certainly out there that, objectively speaking, in terms of studies that are done, largely on reviewing several Auditor General's reports, that in some cases, the P3 approach has resulted in failure in terms of cost, risk management, and evidence-based decision-making. And that cost Nova Scotians tens of millions more than the traditional procurement process. I'm curious as to, I suppose, what policies and procedures have the department put in place to mitigate future failures in terms of cost and risk management? Because certainly there are, I believe, while there are examples of success, unfortunately, there are examples where it didn't work out. So what policies have you put in place to mitigate potential failures?
Ms. Harland?
I think, as has been said, we're following established processes. We're learning, we're speaking to others that have done similar projects, learning from their lessons learned. You know, the value for money, the market sounding, the processes that we're following. These are all processes that have been established, refined as projects and times move along. So we're working with the benefit of the experience of others and our own experiences.
Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the supporting research documents that was sent mentions how maintenance work on the road, on the toll road, was considered sole source. Now, from my understanding, there is no competitive bidding process involved in the costing and in the work that is undertaken with maintenance. Will this P3 project, will it contain any work that will be needed that will be considered sole source? In other words, no competition for maintenance. It's just if you could comment on that, please.
Ms. Harland?
So again, without getting into details of the procurement, the very nature of design, build, finance, operate, maintain P3 type project is that the proponent that is awarded the work, it's based on their proposal and their costing. So it's part of the overall package. It's not something separate from the overall procurement.
Mr. Hammond with about a minute and a half left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your opinion, is sole source, does that provide good value for money in terms of, once someone has a contract over, say, 5 years to provide maintenance, do you think that should be opened up to competition?
Mr. LaFleche.
Just a general question. Question, yeah.
So that's really a question for my colleague, Deputy Monroe, but because she's in charge of procurement, and it's really a procurement question. But we have all sorts of international and national agreements we have to follow with respect to procurement. There are times when things are needed on an urgent basis. For instance, we're probably in a period of that right now, and because of the storm. And sometimes sole sourcing, just doesn't deliver you the product you need. Sometimes competitive bids and the full process doesn't deliver you the product you need in time. For instance, if Nova Scotia Power needed to replace a couple of generators up on a pole and they went to a competitive bid and it took 3 months to get the generators, people would be out of power for a long time. So sometimes they just have to quickly sole source those generators or the whatever piece of equipment they need. We do that from time to time when there's an emergency or when there's only one supplier of a particular product. That happens, and then your job is if there's only one supplier, your job is to negotiate the best deal you can with that supplier. And there are other ways you can gain leverage, and you work hard on that to do that. But generally, no, sole source is not a tool we would use. But from time to time, we have to sole source, and it's in the best interest of the public.
Order, please.
That we sole source.
The time for the PC caucus has expired, so Ms. Roberts, with the NDP, you have 12 minutes.
Thank you very much. People in Nova Scotia are worried about the safety consequences of outsourcing the construction and maintenance of our highways, particularly based on the experience in New Brunswick, where P3 highways were closed the most days of any highways last winter. We understand that passing lanes were frequently undrivable, and it often took more than 36 hours after a snowfall for those P3 highways to be cleared. And clearly this is very important both for EHS paramedics, the RCMP, but also just for general travelers. And last year, or this year, the New Brunswick Auditor General found that decisions to outsource highway construction and maintenance work were made on a subjective basis without adequate evidence, and discovered that there wasn't an adequate decision-making framework for determining which programs and construction tasks to outsource. And finally, the Auditor General also found in New Brunswick that outsourcing these programs came at a higher cost and that government responded to private sector requests for additional work which cost taxpayers more. So at this point, I wonder if the Deputy Minister can confirm that additional kilometers of maintenance work above and beyond what was included in the original stretch of highway to be twin from Sutherlands River to Antigonish were added to the RFP at bidder's request.
Mr. LaFleche.
First of all, the construction part, and I'll pass it on to Peter Hackett for the maintenance. We almost always outsource construction. It's done now. There's no construction in-house, so that I know of. So that's just the way it is. So I don't know what the difference is here. When we tendered Highway 103, I think it's Dexter that has that job. So that's outsourced to Dexter, and they're doing the construction. There is no in-house crew that would have done the 103 twinning. The question is not, I don't know how to answer that question because there's no base of in-house construction. On the maintenance side, I'll let Peter Hackett go for it.
Mr. Hackett?
So I guess the first thing is I can't comment on with regard to New Brunswick. So New Brunswick has completely different highway standards than Nova Scotia. So they do things differently in with regard to snow removal, and they do things differently with maintenance as well. So we have different standards. So we are very tight with New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland in the way we discuss things, but we don't do things the same way. So I can't comment on what they do in New Brunswick. In Nova Scotia, we obviously have the Cobequid Pass that we as I mentioned before, we do the maintenance and operations there, or the consortium does. The agency, that's held to the same level of service as the rest of the province, and we have caveats in place to make sure that's done as good, if not better, than what the other 100 series are. We also have we do private work. Private companies do work for us at an individual basis. We hire private trucks to do work for us in the wintertime because we don't have enough operators to do the work, which is another issue that we have within the province, but that's another story. That we have. So when those private contractors are hired by their individual bases, they do the same level of service, the same work as our normal operators or in-house people would do. So they're held to the same level of standard that we have within the province. So that has never really been an issue with outsourcing to private companies to do work for us. We've always kept them at the same standard. There's always been some sort of caveat or penalties involved. They don't. With regard to your question about the length of the project from Sutherlands River to Antigonish and then expanding it a bit further for more maintenance, that was decided before the project went to tender. We made that decision that we'd have a bigger section of maintenance because it just made more sense by volume to do a larger section.
I'm just going to go back to Ms. Roberts first to make sure that you want to continue on this vein.
I'm going to ask a quick follow-up related to maintenance. Can we assure residents of Antigonish County in terms of what the standard will be for snowfall removal from this highway? What are the standards of clearance? Will it be expected to be full clearance, or will partial do? And how will the province be monitoring the standard of maintenance, including snow clearing, after this project is completed?
Mr. Hackett.
I can't comment with regard to what's in the contract of guarantees and contractual agreements because what we said it is out to RFP. We would expect the consortium to do the same level of service, if not better level of service that we currently have on 100 series highways.
Mr. LaFleche.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize on the maintenance side, as Mr. Hackett says, a lot of the times that we contract out maintenance, it's not for quality reasons. It's because of the type of equipment we have. The large equipment is not good for small subdivisions. Sometimes it's more convenient for a town or a municipality to do the maintenance because of proximity reasons, and we do a flip with them. There's all sorts of reasons, but we are very, very satisfied with the quality of our internal workforce. Very proud of them. They do a great job. In fact, they're out there now helping, hopefully, to restore power by assisting Nova Scotia Power, and they've always given us great service. So it's not about that. It's about convenience and efficiency for Nova Scotians.
Ms. Roberts.
I want to go back to the assertion that that this had to be a P3 project in order to get it built quickly. we did have the $90 million commitment from the federal government on the table more than a year ago, and we also had made a provincial commitment in 2017. If this had been pursued as a public project and there wasn't the necessity to go through this long RFP procurement negotiation with the 3 competitive bidders and so forth, might we not have already been seeing work on this project proceeding?
Mr. Hackett.
I can speak to the engineering part of it. I'll let Ms. Saurette or Ms. Harland speak to the financial part of it. So on the actual construction part, just to kind of let you know on the way the department was doing their priorities, we did the piece in Antigonish. That was the last piece of twinning that we did down that way, and then we did the 125 in Sydney. That was a piece that we had based on traffic volumes, and there was issues around the Antigonish area that we wanted to kind of get away from the traffic lights and that sort of thing. So those were done. The next pieces that we're going to were the 103 and the 101. The 101 was a section through Windsor that was left kind of orphaned that we wanted to get completed. A lot of traffic through there, and the 103. All those things were prepared and already designed and already planned. So it was already ready to go to tender whenever we had the funding to go. The 104 section wasn't on the radar between Sutherlands River and Antigonish. We had no engineering done. We had no geotechnical done. We had no right-of-way done. But we really didn't have, we had an alignment to some extent, but not a full alignment. So, and we still don't really have those things done except for the land that we're working on right now and kind of a line of alignment that will be determined by the consortium. So if we try to go to tender on that conventionally, it would have taken us a lot of years to go out and do the geotechnical and do the alignment and do the detailed designs to get them ready for a conventional tender. Could have been done, it's just that it would have taken longer because the prep time would have taken longer. And I'm not sure about the financing because a lot of these projects we do piece by piece by piece because of the fact that we have so much designed and then we get the financing for it.
Ms. Roberts?
I'm just wondering, with the $90 million commitment from the federal government, was that contingent on the project being a P3?
Ms. Harland?
Pardon me. That was part of the proposal, and that is what they contributed to.
So that was framed by the province that it would be a P3 project when the federal funding was requested.
Ms. Harland? Ms. Roberts?
A couple of times there's been comparisons to Antigonish where that 10-kilometer stretch took 10 years, as I understand it. I've driven through there. It feels like a very complicated stretch. Each interchange leads to multiple roundabouts and so forth. Is it fair to compare that stretch of 100 Series Highway to the Sutherlands River through Barney's River stretch, which is much more rural and doesn't involve that level of complication?
Mr. Hackett?
Yeah, they're two sort of a little bit separate. The Antigonish section is a little bit more urban, just because, as you mentioned, the interchanges through there. So there are 2 or 3 interchanges, and then you're going kind of around more, like I say, more urban settings, more buildings, more homes, that sort of layout around the highway. But through Sutherlands River and Antigonish is pretty rural, pretty straight. The only section that would be different than what you really see today other than the twinning is the section around Barney's River. So the Barney's River section right now goes more to the north, and we're going to go to the south of that to make it a complete 4 lanes, about 10 kilometers long of new 4 lanes. The old section through Barney's River was an old design. It's old engineering where they kind of followed the contours of the mountains, so we're trying to get away from that to make it a better geometry. So it's a little bit, you can do it a little faster, a little safer.
Ms. Roberts, with a minute and a half left.
We've built a lot of highway infrastructure in this province, and we continue to invest and prioritize a lot. Building the robustness of the 100 Series Highway. Overall, have we seen collision rates decrease as more highways are twinned?
Mr. Hackett?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a we do have records that show that I'll go with the fatality rates go down. There is still collisions on 100 series highways, but the fatalities that we had, and I'll say 100 series highway twinned. So twinned highways that are 100 series fatality rates do go down. There's still collisions on 100 series highways, obviously speed and inattentive and that sort of thing that we see more of. But the fatalities where you have these head-on collisions and you have multiple vehicles involved. When you get to a twinned highway, the statistics do show that you're getting less fatalities.
Mr. LaFleche?
I just want to stress that Ms. Lonescroft brought up a good point earlier, is that twinning is not the only way to achieve that purpose, but we tend to default to twinning. There are other ways, and we have employed some of those other ways in the province. But in these, because of the nature of the trade corridor here on the 104, twinning was felt to be the correct solution.
The time for the NDP Caucus has expired. We'll now go for the final 12 minutes to the Liberal Caucus. Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much to the witnesses who have been participating today. It's been very informative so far. I just want to go back to the question about snow removal down in Antigonish, and I recognize that the opposition members here today are all from the beautiful city of the Lakes, Dartmouth, and therefore may not be as aware of the standards for snow removal here in the province. And I can assure you that once we hit our winter months, that will be one of the number one topics that people are contacting my office about. But it is very, very rare, almost unheard of, that we ever get a complaint or question regarding snow removal on the 100 series highways. Your performance on that is outstanding, and I don't want to take away anything from our neighbors in New Brunswick. You say they have different standards, they have different weather patterns, but your work is very good, and I don't think that the folks in Antigonish need to be too concerned about snow clearance on the 104 through their area. Somewhat related to that and the mentioning of fatality reductions, Mr. Hackett, perhaps you could confirm that I believe I heard earlier, but the last questions brought up the topic of reductions of accidents and fatalities, and I think you quoted some statistics from the Cobequid Pass that would indicate that there was a reduction in fatalities on that P3 program. Could you repeat those for the benefit of the committee?
Mr. Hackett.
Yeah, so before the Cobequid Pass was built, and the 104, which is now Trunk 4, ran through, I guess, from Masstown up through Westchester Station. It was the 104. It was a two-lane highway, and it was a two-lane highway, as I mentioned earlier about the Arnie's River, is that it's an old design where highways were built around the contours of a mountain, and they used the mountain as their basic geometry. And so through that section of highway, they were experiencing about upward of maybe 3 fatalities a year. When they went and opened up the Cobequid Pass, and for the last 20 years that's been open, or 20 plus years, the average fatality rate is around 0.8 or 0.5, somewhere in that range. So it's less than 1 now, 1 a year. And you might get more in 1 year and none in another year, but it is a lot less than what it was.
Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you would certainly agree then that there has been, in fact, not a greater safety risk with a P3 project, but in fact, in that case, there was a significant decrease in traffic fatalities and risk to the public.
Mr. Hackett.
So yeah, if you're looking at that as the P3, I guess the biggest part there on the P3 was the fact that, as Ms. Saurette mentioned earlier, it was built in 20 months. So it opened up. Obviously, as we said, there's less fatalities now that it's opened up, but you got it open quicker, so there was less fatalities after that was built. So 20 months is very quick, and if you did it longer, then you'd have to keep the other highway open, and there'd be more fatalities if that was open. So for that reason alone, yes, the Cobequid Pass and opening that up to a P3 was a success.
Mr. McKay.
Thank you for that. I also would like to touch base on a previous subject here on the federal support. And as I understand from the deputy, there was $90 million provided through the National Trade Corridors Fund. Of course, I frequently travel the 103 because the twinning on the 103 right now that's occurring is entirely within my constituency, and I see those great big signs that talk about federal as well as provincial support there. So the support in those is not coming from the Corridors Fund. Is it coming from the Federal Infrastructure Bank, or how do they provide that funding? What's their mechanism?
Mr. LaFleche.
So that's a little complex, because I think you may be seeing signs for the Ingramport interchange. Did the feds contribute to the Ingramport? Yes. So the twinning and the interchange are two different projects. The Ingramport interchange had a federal contribution. I don't know if, do you know how much that was? Does anybody?
No, but.
Okay, so that was done prior, and that did have a federal contribution. The twinning section of the 103 that you see going on now between exits 5 and 6, that's Tantallon, if I pronounce that correctly, because I'm from the north end where Miss Roberts comes from, not from the City of Lakes. So I might pronounce things poorly. So Tantallon to Hubbard's, that is provincially paid, I believe, 100%. Is that correct?
10.
The twinning.
No, that's cost share.
That's a cost share? Yeah. So that's a cost share also, but that's a separate cost share, and Ms. Saurette is pulling out the numbers right now.
It's like 66.
So what do you want,
Ms. Saurette.
Hi there. Upper Tantallon to Hubbard's? Okay.
While she's looking for the numbers, I will explain something about
Mr. LaFleche.
Is that the Ingramport interchange and this cost sharing on the Tantallon to Hubbard's are part of the old New Build Canada. Now, get the irony in that, the old New Build Canada, because there was a Build Canada, then a New Build Canada, and that was under a previous federal government, okay? So the New Build Canada phased out, and we had money left in, which we applied to several projects, and you'll see that cost sharing. Under the new infrastructure program that was brought in 2016 by the federal government, which was elected in 2015, there is actually no highway money, okay, for provinces. I'm drilling too far down, but so the only access were for things that are considered trade corridors, which is not part of the core infrastructure program. And that's where we got the 104 money, from trade corridors, which is not part of the base allocation of the province.
Mr. McKay.
I don't need the specific numbers, Ms. Saurette. Thank you for diligently looking for them there, but that was not the nature of my question. It was because I have seen the signs and was well aware that that was a cost share project. I just wanted to clarify the difference that we receive money specifically from the federal government for the P3 project because it's for the 104, because it is part of the National Trades Corridors Fund, and we would not have received that money otherwise. That $90 million top up, as you said, that it wasn't coming from something like the old new program or the new old program or such, or the new program.
Mr. LaFleche.
Sorry, the new program, the highways are not eligible, so the only way was to go through a competitive process for non-census allocated money from Ottawa, where we have to actually win part of the, at that time was at about $1 billion available across Canada. Nova Scotia actually scored in the 4 projects we got, the Premier stated this last week, 170 odd million, which is way above our population percentage of that competitive process.
Ms. Saurette, you have a brief response to Mr. McKay.
Yeah, just on the twinning program, it's approximately, close to $1 billion if we look at all of the sections of the highway and all that, and this includes Sutherlands and that. In federal funding, we're over $400 million is what we're getting from the federal government from various funds, whether it's our new Building Canada fund, which is our allegation based, so we get it based on population. Highways and Bridges is eligible under that program. And then we look at some of these other programs like the National Trade Corridors. That's a merit-based, so we have to apply. And we're competing with the rest of Canada on those funds. National Disaster Mitigation Program. That is another one where, we seek, funding for our highway programs. So we look and we try to leverage what are the pots of money out there, what are we going to get from an allocation, but what are some of these other merit-based programs that we can apply to. We've been very successful in trade corridors and national disaster mitigation because we got about $230 million extra for our province, and it helps to go towards these twinning projects.
Going to go back to Mr. McKay. Mr. LaFleche, you might be able to include your answer later. Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy. Certainly, what we've heard today with all these twinning projects and the funding, it's obvious that the relationship between the provincial government and the federal government for these massive roadway infrastructure projects in Nova Scotia has been excellent. I was wondering if you could speak on towards future plans for the 104 to continue it from the Antigonish, or relatively just east of Antigonish, through to the Canso Causeway.
Mr. LaFleche, you will have a minute and a half.
You might have detected in the earlier comments that we'd like you to invite us back to talk about infrastructure funds generally, but we'll leave that for a future day. So there is no highway allocation in the Infrastructure Canada money going forward except trade corridors, which is a much smaller fund, and you have to be competitive. We, like other provinces, would like to see the federal government come back with a new infrastructure program. They can decide how many news they need in front of it, and reintroduce highway funding. In which case, we would be very excited to look at projects such as the one you just mentioned and others. So maybe I'll ask Peter then to say where we might be on corridor reservation or other design planning for the day when the federal government comes back with a new.
Mr. McKay, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I recently traveled along the 104 and believe I noticed some wildlife protection fences, if I saw them correctly. Are there any plans for further usage of those on the 104 or other twinned highways?
Mr. Hackett.
There is some future for them. We're looking at areas across the province that mostly for deer, and looking at correlation between deer crossing with DNR and where these fences should go up. But we don't have the same problem here in Nova Scotia as they do in New Brunswick, where they have moose. Moose are more, if you hit a moose, it's more of a fatality, or you're injured quite severely. If you hit deer, it's a little different.
The time for questioning has expired, and we want to thank the witnesses for appearing this morning and invite you to make any closing remarks if you so wish.
Yes, thank you very much for getting us here. It is a complex story. We did do a lot of advertising about it.
I'm sorry, Mr. LaFleche, Mike. There.
Oh, okay. I speak too quickly. Start over. Thank you very much for inviting us here. We're very proud of the work we've done on the highway system and in infrastructure in general. We'd like to be invited one day back to talk about the infrastructure funds. No, I'm seeing these guys don't want it, but that's okay. I want to mention just something on the FOIPOP thing, because we did not mention that we knew that someone had applied for a FOIPOP. We do not know that. We never find that out, and we're not going to talk about that outside this room. So the fact that so-and-so applied for FOIPOPs is a privacy thing, and we're not aware of that. We're not part of that process. It's done in a different department, and it's shielded from us. I hope that we were able to answer most of the members' questions. I think we were, and I think we're probably going to have to answer some more questions outside this room. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you to the committee for being here. And I'm sure that further down the road, the invitation might be extended, but that's going to be the wish of the committee at that point. So again, thank you so much. So committee members will just move along and finish committee business, and there's a few items that need to be dealt with. First of all is correspondence. And everybody, I think, has received a copy of the correspondence from the deputy for information that was requested from the July 12th or July 10th meeting. So that correspondence has been received. No questions or comments on it. Okay. Next is the 2018 annual report. And the subcommittee has reviewed the report and passed a motion to send it to the full committee for approval. So the report has been sent to all members. And is there any changes or comments that anyone wants to put forward? No? If there are none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the 2018 annual report for the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Ms. Lonescroft.
I move that we send the annual report to the legislature at the next sitting.
Do we have a seconder? Don't need a seconder? Okay. Thank you. The motion is carried. Okay, next is on the 13th of November, the Auditor General and the Department of Finance will be appearing regarding the annual financial report for the Auditor General. Now, the Department of Finance has offered to provide a briefing or a training session on the public accounts in advance of when they appear to discuss the AG's financial report. And I think this was something similar that was done in 2017. So if the members are interested, there are a couple of options that could be considered. And of course, that all be subject to the availability of finance. The first would be that our October meeting could be extended to hold a training session, or we could have a separate meeting for a training session. And third, we could have a training held on the day that the AG does appear, but stirred early to have that training session. So I guess it's up to the committee to decide what they wish. Do you want to extend the meeting in October? Separate meeting. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Even though we are in session, I think it would be the best option seems to me to extend that October 9th meetings because we'll all be here. It's going to be hard to find a time when we can all meet outside of these regular meeting dates, especially given that we are going into session soon. So I vote for extending the meeting on October 9th. I'm interested in the training. And maybe it's only just for the people who want to stay for the training.
Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And well, I appreciate Ms. LeBlanc's points. I think the first question we have to determine is how long is the training in the sense of is it 1 hour of training or is it 5 hours of training? Because that would significantly impact if the House is sitting.
Well, I can't answer that. I don't know if we can get an answer. Ms. Langell.
I believe when they did it before, it was 2 hours, but I think they can adjust it to what the committee feels would be appropriate. But I think previously it was 2 hours.
Mr. McKay?
That would therefore make it very difficult to do if it was to be 2 hours. If we normally sit until 11, most of us have, of course, briefings before we come into the legislature starting at 12:30. Perhaps the training could be split into 2 1-hour sections, but or it could be done at caucus, my colleague is suggesting, or we have caucus that day, yeah, sorry. So I would prefer that we establish another date to do the training outside of normal legislative sitting.
Okay, Ms. Roberts?
I would agree that scheduling a different date when we're not in the legislature would be ideal. I did find the training very useful, and I think, you know, for any of us who are more comfortable with words than we are reading financial statements, I think there's a lot to be gained from the training. I would suggest that we look at a Wednesday morning, maybe 2 weeks or 1 week in advance of the November meeting. We used to have these meetings every Wednesday, and so I still kind of hold them in my calendar in the hopes that they will once again be occupied by public accounts.
Mr. Hobb.
Chair, I concur with my colleague, Ms. Roberts. I think another date is probably the best way to go. I mean, while I think, you know, certainly having it on October 9th has its merits, it's going to prove to be very challenging, especially with the House in session. So I certainly think we should look at another date to facilitate that training.
Mr. LeBlanc.
I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I forgot that I was thinking that never mind. It doesn't matter. I was confused. I agree.
Okay, maybe can we leave it as, again, it's going to be based on the availability of finance, but how about if we just leave it and see if we can find a Wednesday for a couple of hours that is available at regular committee hours, although the committee won't be meeting, but we can have it then. Ms. Lonescroft.
And may I suggest, since we did this since 2017, maybe the shorter version would be better? Like if they could do it to an hour, would be a better training?
Well, then we don't.
If it's possible.
We don't have.
Okay, again, that would be left to the discretion of finance, but if everybody agrees, we'll just pick a date that's suitable for finance and contact everybody after that. Okay? Okay, so our next meeting is on October 9th, and we have an 8:30 to 9 o'clock in-camera session. And the session will be the Public Service Commission, Departments of Agriculture, Community Services, and Justice concerning diversity and inclusion in the public service from the May 2019 report of the Auditor General, Chapter 1. Is there any further business to come before the meeting? Any further business? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.